in the way that you might want to.
Hi there, this video's gone live.
Right now?
Severe.
I mean, I think observing the garden, seeing which areas are really struggling
Water,
this year, and
drought
being prepared
advice,
that this might happen
weather
more and more
forecast UK
frequently, as you
2022.
see more unpredictable weather. So possibly having a rethink, a redesign of certain spaces. Certainly not planting anything new now, because new plants always need watering. But it's just kind of careful watering. So watering with a watering can be really effective if you use drip trays to hold that extra water that may kind of run through the bottom. Also, if you water in the early morning or the late evening when you don't have so much evaporation. And things like not watering the lawn will survive, so don't waste your water on that, but just kind of prioritise your precious special plants, because as you say, we love our plants. They can be like our friends, so we want to look after them as best we can.
It's tricky, isn't it? Because over the last couple of years, I know lots of people have spent more time in their gardens. It's a real kind of a source of pleasure for lots of people. And now we're having to think differently about how we look after them. How hardy could our plants be, and which are the plants that will be vulnerable at times like this?
Well, I mean, the thing is that we're having really unpredictable weather all over the country. Some people get floods more often than they used to, and at the moment we're seeing this huge
Not
amount
just
of
us, the whole Northern Hemisphere's weather's
so generally, arid-loving plants,
out of sync.
Silver foliage, very small foliage, that tends to survive more easily in drought conditions. But what we can all do when we're watering, and this goes for every year, is water things really, really well, but less frequently. And that means that the water goes right down to the roots and encourages root growth deep into the ground, so that even when it's dry, the plants can often access that kind of ground water rather than relying on us. If we water too often, then our plants get really dependent on us. Obviously, things like annuals, so bedding, and lots of vegetables will really need water because they don't have the time to put those deep roots down. So again, prioritising those rather than just watering everything in your garden. I always think things in the ground should, hopefully, if we've watered them well, be resilient enough to kind of grow on their own, even when it's tough. But things kind of in containers will definitely need regular watering.
Interesting, that point about not allowing plants to become too reliant on us. There's probably a danger that we might overwater sometimes, isn't there? Francis, do you think gardeners are going to have to make some tough decisions about which plants they can save and which ones they really want to keep? Because it's interesting, you were talking about vegetables as well. You know, we're not really allowed to water those more, even though they're providing for the food chain.
You can still get vegetables. I have an allotment that has a permanent hosepipe ban. We have to only use watering cans, and I still get a good harvest. So you can really target things that need more water. But yeah, we do have to make some tough decisions, and I think actually our climate is clearly changing. So it's the same with any garden. It's right plant, right place, and it just may be that place that we have, that we've got used to, is slightly changing as the years go on and the weather becomes more challenging for us too.
And it's not just home gardeners who are being hit by this, is it? It's also going to be a struggle at the moment for farmers too.
Yeah, I mean, it's really tough. I work in a market garden, so growing vegetables, and luckily we have a big borehole and we're spring fed, so we don't come into this. But if we run out of that spring, if it dries up, which it could happen, we have to then go on to mains water, which means, again, like everyone else, we're using watering cans. But for farming, it is really challenging. For anyone who's trying to grow commercially, this is serious. You know, this is people's livelihoods and industries and the food that we rely on. So I think it's
devastating.
Yeah, as gardeners, we always get very sentimental about our gardens, and it's easy to do that. But thinking about people whose jobs really rely on the weather being a little more predictable and perspective.
It's got to be the rice. It's rice if you haven't noticed the six.
Amongst gardeners and farmers, that they're being targeted in terms of what they can use.
In 2018, the driest part of the UK was in the western parts of England. This time, it's south east and southern England. 2022, compared to 2018.
A quarter of all of its water gets leaked, you know, as it's being distributed in pipes and reservoirs. Is it fair that gardeners are targeted in this way?
Well, of course I would say no, wouldn't I? It is really frustrating, actually, because, like you say, a lot of people who are growing their own food, and that's taking a lot of pressure off industry, taking pressure off air miles, shipping miles, and things like that. So actually, to be targeted when you're growing and providing greenery, which let's not forget, is also a really good carbon sump and reducing the problem of atmospheric CO2 as well. You know, gardening is not always green, but if we do it right, then it can be. So it does feel frustrating that when there is so much wastage of water going on elsewhere, it's gardeners and farmers that are targeted first. But also, it's a good lesson. You know, if we're always using watering cans, if we think about our water usage as gardeners and growers, we can, you know, water in the mornings, water in the evenings, and do it well, then we're always going to be saving a bit of water and taking the pressure off our reservoir.
I know you've talked about lawns already, but can I clarify just sort of once and for all?
They will recover.
Even if you leave your lawn and it looks like straw,
It will
and it's
recover.
bright yellow or brown, it will still come back. Is that right?
Of course it will.
That's right. Yep. All the lawns I have at work are brown. It takes the pressure off me because I don't have to mow them at the moment. But it will come back as soon as we get rain. It will green up again. I know my dad always tells me that I'd be very proud of him. He watered his lawn, and I always tell him off. You don't have to water a lawn. It will come back. It will survive.
It's not essential.
An awful lot of perennials, they have deep root systems. They can die back. Even if they die back for the winter, they'll reshoot in the spring. What I would say is any newly planted trees and shrubs and perennials that you have, any veg, any annuals, and any really treasured plants, they're the things that we should all be focusing on.
Like your sunflowers.
It is great to talk to you this morning with really useful advice.
And the baby plants especially.
Thank you very much.
If you like this video, please and thumbs up. Subscribe to my YouTube channel on Sanjay Evans.
Don't water, and we sort of know that, but you think, oh, you can't.
The force to be with you always. Quite a spot the needs the money. Outweigh need to subscribe to my channel on Sanjay. Yeah.
A lot more brown lawns.
Please subscribe to my channel on Sanjay Evans. Yep. Subscribe to my YouTube channel on Sanjay Evans. That's watching. Bye everyone.